Thank you so much for being here today. Today's date is June 20th, 2025. Getting started real quick, what is your name?
Brandon Harvey.
Perfect. And where and when were you born?
I was born in North Richland Hills, Texas on February 17th of 1987.
Who are your parents?
Jackie and Sherry Harvey.
And what did they do for a living?
My dad was a salesman, and he had switched jobs. He worked for American Airlines when 9/11 happened and lost his job, and was kind of caught between things. And then he ended up being a warehouse manager at a Mission in downtown Fort Worth, where he just retired last year.
That's impressive.
And my mom is an executive assistant, and she's worked for a couple different companies for CEOs.
How incredible. What primary and secondary schools or college did you attend?
I attended Keller High School in Keller, Texas, graduated in 2005. I have used my GI Bill to go to some college since I got out, but I have not finished. I have about 75 hours.
Nice. Do you feel like your father working for the airlines when 9/11 hit impacted your choice to join the service?
I don't know if necessarily him working for the airline, but just 9/11 in general, because I was in high school whenever it happened. A lot of guys my age, I'd say half the guys I graduated high school with considered going to the military. There was a lot of us that did back then.
Did you have any jobs before entering the service?
Yeah, I worked in a call center. My mom had worked there. She got me the job my senior year of high school. I actually made decent money, but that's not what I wanted to do. I had a scholarship, a partial scholarship to go play football, and then decided to not go and go to the military instead. I joined this summer right after I graduated high school.
Awesome. Were you drafted? Did you enlist? Well, obviously you weren't drafted, but did you enlist or were you commissioned?
No, I enlisted.
Enlisted. And then what branch did you serve in?
In the Navy.
Navy. So we had talked about how you joined because of 9/11. How did that resonate with you personally, and how did you determine what branch of service you wanted to join?
It's actually a funny story, because I had always wanted to be a Marine, but when I went to the recruiter, the Navy and the Marine recruiters were right next to each other. Back in those days, the recruiting station was full all the time, and there wasn't any open recruiters in the Marine recruiting station. And I looked next door, because they had the same door that you went into, but then different doors on either side. So like the reception area was the same. And then I looked on the Navy side, and there was a recruiter with a desk open, so I walked in there instead, because I'm a tad bit impatient. So it was first choice Marines, and Navy was kind of second choice.
Looking back, are you glad you went Navy instead of Marines?
Yeah, because it kind of outlined the whole job path of my life, because I went and I worked on aircraft, and I still work in aircraft and defense to this day.
Wow, that's incredible. What type of training or schooling did you receive?
So obviously I went to boot camp first, and then they send you to a training. It's a base that's close to where the boot camp base is for the Navy, and it's basically kind of like indoctrinating you for what to be used to before you go do anything else, and it takes like 2 weeks. It's like basic Navy course outside of boot camp. And then I went to, in the Navy they call it A school. That's where you learn your job, your job or MOS that you picked whenever you join. That's where the A school is, where you learn your initial job, like the broad arching part of it. And then after that is called C school, and that is aircraft specific to the aircraft that you're going to be working on. So I think it was about 5 months of school total after boot camp before I went to my first squadron and started actually working.
Wow. What was your most vivid memory of training?
Of training or of boot camp?
Both.
Both. I'd say my most vivid memory of boot camp, because this is the memory that always sticks out to me, is whenever we got off the bus from the airport and they walked us into the building and they lined us all up against the wall and made us put our feet on these yellow marks, and they told us about what's called the 1,000-yard stare and said pick a spot on the other side of the wall and stare at it and pick that spot, and whatever happens next, don't veer off from it. And from that point, about 10 drill instructors walked in and just started screaming and cussing at us. And they did that for like 10 minutes straight. And I remember thinking to myself, what the heck did I get myself into? So that's probably my most vivid memory. And then it was all easy after that.
That's good. What was the worst part of your training?
The worst part is boot camp, is the isolation piece of it. You're cut off from the world for 2.5 months. I don't know if, I think it's changed since then, but we got like one phone call and then you get letters. But other than that, you're cut off from the outside world, and it's like the whole world stops while you're there.
And who was your one phone call to?
My parents.
Parents?
Yeah.
What was that phone call like?
It was more of a, hey, I'm doing okay, how are you doing? And a lot of time was spent on kind of current events, because Hurricane Katrina happened while I was in boot camp, like right as I was going to boot camp. And my dad had actually, I didn't know it, he had spent a bunch of time with the relief efforts down in New Orleans. So we kind of tried to talk as much about just us instead of focusing on where I was.
Nice. What was your first assignment after basic training or boot camp?
So after boot camp, it was school for learning my job. And then after that, I went to my first squadron, and I actually went to school in Lemoore, California. So the Navy, for aviation training, sends everybody to Pensacola, Florida for training. But since Hurricane Katrina happened whenever I was in boot camp, they weren't sending anybody there. So they took half of us and sent us to Oceana, Virginia, and half of us and sent us to the middle of nowhere, California. And that's where I went to school. And then I got my first duty station was actually there as well. And it was a training squadron with a lot of aircraft and a lot of people, and it was part Navy and part Marine squadron.
And what was it like having kind of a makeshift training? I mean, it obviously wasn't where it's always been. Were there any changes?
So it was kind of makeshift, but there was already a school there established there, but like the C school, not the A school part of it. So like the aircraft specific part of it, you're supposed to go to A school in Pensacola, and then you can go there for the C school. So luckily it had already kind of been established, and it didn't take too much for them to incorporate that as well. But for us, it kind of sucked because we didn't get to experience Pensacola, and I really wanted to do that.
Yeah, Pensacola is a nice place to
Yes.
visit. What specific MOS were you trained for?
So my specific job, so in the Navy we do it a little bit different. We don't do it by like a number, it's by a letter rating. So in the Navy I was what was called an AME, so Aviation Structural Mechanic, and the E stands for egress. So I worked on ejection systems, so canopy and the ejection seat, and then I also worked on the environmental control systems. So all the bleed air that comes off the engines, it gets made into cold air, and it's used to cool off the electronics as well as the pilot sitting in the seat.
Nice. And so what obviously you mentioned A school and C school, but how extensive was that training when you're talking about the egress systems as well as the environmental controls?
It was pretty extensive, especially once we got to the specific C school, because this is exactly what you're going to be working on. They had actual like physical trainers that we went to and practiced disarming ejection seats and canopy systems, as well as the pneumatic components that we'd be working on as well. But most of the training that I received on doing my job was on the job training. So like you can sit in a classroom and learn about it all day, but you really don't know what you're doing until you start doing it hands-on.
And do you feel like that lesson has kind of contributed over to your civilian life as well?
Yeah, well, especially because the job that I did, so whenever we got to school the very first day, our instructor walked in and he said, okay, there's something very different about this job compared to the rest. He said, all the other jobs, there's fail-safes and you can make mistakes and things happen. But this is one job that you're not allowed to make mistakes because we are the fail-safe. And if ever anything else goes wrong on the aircraft, they have to count on our system to work correctly. And if you don't think that you can be perfect, raise your hand and you shouldn't be in this class. So that kind of resonated with me going forward for the rest of my life. I've kind of always tried to be perfect in everything I do. And it kind of is a fault sometimes because I don't give myself room for failure.
And that's kind of a blessing and a curse to have as a quality in yourself.
Yes.
Does a specific instructor or leader during your trainer stand out in your mind? How come?
Not so much during my actual like school training, but more while I was already in the fleet and working and being on deployment and everything. There was one particular, we called them LPOs or lead petty officers. So basically they were the ones in charge of the shop. It was E6 and he was responsible for getting me all my certifications whenever I was in my shop, for really teaching me how to do my job. So, and I still talk to him to this day. So he was, his last name was Batten. He's a really cool guy. He actually lives in Kuwait now and still works on airplanes for the Kuwaiti Air Force.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did you receive any promotions during your time in the service?
Yeah, so you get automatic promotions all the way up to E3. And then once you get above E3 is when you start having to make promotion. So for the Navy, it was a combination of evaluation, the actual test, and then time of service. So I only made it to the rank of E4. So in the Navy, it was 3rd class petty officer. But yeah, that's as far as I got in my 5 years that I was in.
Nice. What was the hardest thing for you to adapt to when you entered the service?
Not having an answer for everything that somebody says, being able to just absorb. That was the biggest thing, and it's stuck with me the rest of my life. It's something that's hard to do, but that's something they really stress whenever, especially when you're in boot camp in the early phases. You got to be able to let stuff go off your shoulder.
And do you feel like that's something that people who maybe have not served in the military kind of struggle to grasp?
A lot of people, yes. If you've ever worked around a lot of veterans, I would say that most of us are thin, our skin's a little bit thicker than other people's for that very reason. Because you can't have a lot of people that get emotional really easy, be together all the time in close quarters all the time.
Absolutely. So when and where did you serve?
So I served from 2005 to 2010. I was in a training squadron from 2006, January of 2006 to the very beginning of 2008. And then 2008, in March, I transferred to a sea deploying squadron, which was still at the same home base. But I transferred in March, came home for a month, and then we left in May on deployment. We left from San Diego. We made a couple stops along the way. The cool part about the Navy is you get to go to a lot of ports. But we did spend 5 months in a war zone off the coast of Pakistan, supporting missions in Afghanistan every day while we were there. And that was I did that in 2008. We got home right the day before Thanksgiving, and then I left again for another deployment in May of 2009 and didn't come back until the end of November and did the same exact thing. So for 2008 and 2009, the U.S. really didn't exist that much to me. So, and I actually, in between those two deployments, I actually got married to my wife, and she was pregnant while I was on my second deployment.
And what was that like, going off to your second deployment with a pregnant, newlywed wife at home?
That's a big reason why I didn't stay in the Navy. I didn't like it. When I went on deployment in 2008, my wife and I had known each other, but we were split up at the time, so I really didn't have a care in the world whenever I went on deployment in 2008. But then when I left in 2009 and I found out she was pregnant, like, I had already gone back to California, she was here in Texas. I found out 2 weeks before I left for deployment that she was pregnant. So it was definitely, my mind definitely thought about that the whole time while I was on deployment and said I'd never want to do this again. And I got out the next year. So.
Did you ever serve in a leadership capacity during your deployment?
So, because of what I did working on aircraft, leadership was more based on what qualifications that you have. And even though I wasn't as high ranking as a lot of people in leadership roles might be, I was highly qualified whenever I was in. So I took charge where there were people who actually physically ranked higher than me, but I was more qualified than they were. So things kind of run on how qualified you are and not what your rank is whenever you're working on aircraft like that.
Nice. Throughout your time deployed, were you involved in any notable conflicts during your service?
In the war in Afghanistan. So we flew missions every single day while we were on. We were in the war zone, but we were kind of off. We were in the Gulf of Oman, right off the coast of Pakistan, and our aircraft would take off in the morning, and they would fly over Pakistan, refuel with Air Force tankers, and run missions over Afghanistan all day long. On my deployment in 2008, we dropped ordnance pretty much every single day we were there. A lot of ordnance, and actually, because of the job that I did, I was ordnance qualified because I had to arm and disarm ejection systems, and we were loading so many bombs at the time that anybody that was qualified, I got pulled in to help with the ordnance handlers and had to help load bombs. So I spent a lot of my time in 2008 actually loading bombs on airplanes whenever they went up on missions.
And how did that shift in your daily duties kind of impact you?
Not at the time, but as I've gotten older, it's affected me, because at the time I didn't think about the bombs and where they were going. I was just doing my job, And now as I have sons who are getting older and getting close to that age, and also with the kind of the state of the world and pictures of cities being bombed and stuff on TV, I definitely have thought about that a lot more than I did whenever I was younger. Because there was no closure for us. We loaded the bombs on and they came back and they weren't there anymore. So I didn't think about it when I was young, but I definitely think about that now.
Absolutely. Is there a memorable incident that you'd like to share about?
The thing that scared me more than anything was in 2008, we were participating in all those operations over Afghanistan, and we went to take a break and go to Dubai for port for a couple of days to give everybody a break. And you have to go through what's called the Strait of Hormuz. It's a very small area between the UAE or Oman and Iran. It's like 90 miles wide, I think. But Iran, and they had already had a run-in with the Navy earlier that year, or I think in like January, and they said that no carriers would be going through the strait. And they shut down all our communications. We couldn't send emails back or call anybody, and they didn't tell us when we were going to port. They shut everything down, and like a week and a half later we went through. But whenever we did, we had like Marine helicopters flying all over us and all of our smaller boats, and the whole Iranian Navy was parked out there, and we drove past them. And they had, all our gunners had the guns manned, and all of us that were aviation personnel were kind of told to go to our shops. But we peeked out the doors to see what was going on, and you could see the Iranian Navy there, and that was the scariest thing, just because I was on a big metal box and there's nothing that I could actually do. I was like, I hope somebody doesn't get trigger happy and accidentally pulls the trigger and starts World War III right here. But that was probably the most intense moment that I ever went through.
And this was during your second deployment?
First deployment.
First deployment, okay.
Yeah. The first deployment was definitely a little crazier. If you look back on history, 2008 was the last year of President Bush being in office. Mm-hmm. And then the beginning of 2009 is when President Obama took office. So we still went to Afghanistan and performed missions in 2009, but there was a whole lot less ordnance dropped during that deployment. We actually didn't drop much ordnance at all.
During those moments where you had no communications, was that the United States Navy decided to shut down all communications?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so on the ship, whenever there's anything that requires operational security, they shut all communications down. And then they don't tell anybody when they're actually going to do anything, just to keep that safe. Mm-hmm. Because you think there's almost 5,000 people on a carrier, and that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
The aircraft alone are like worth $40 to $60 million a piece. Mm-hmm. And then you factor in the actual ship, so they kind of take that pretty seriously. And they don't really tell you whenever they're going to shut down communications either. It just kind of happens. If you ask my wife, in 2009 they did it a couple times and she didn't like that either.
I can only imagine why.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Did you form any friendships during that time?
Oh, definitely. Thankfully, right around the time that I went into the service is when social media started. So Facebook became available to the public in 2007, so while I was in. And I'm thankful for those platforms because it's allowed me to kind of stay in touch with everybody that I was in the service with. I actually am still really good friends with a guy that I went to boot camp with. And we went to the same first duty station, and we still talk to this day. So.
Wow. So you mentioned on your first deployment, you and your wife were not together at the time. On your second deployment, y'all were freshly married. She was pregnant. How did you stay in touch with your family and friends throughout that time? I know throughout the years with technological advances, it's kind of changed. How did y'all manage to stay in touch?
So for us, it was mainly email. Phone calls were hard. You could buy phone cards to make phone calls from the ship, but there was like a 5 to 10 second delay on the phone calls. So, because they had to ping them off satellites, and satellite calls weren't as great back then. But so we kind of stuck to emails mainly, but that's pretty much how I communicated. And when we found out the gender of my first son, my wife, instead of sending an email, she actually mailed me the disc from the doctor's office from the sonogram.
And what was that like? How did you receive mail on the ship?
So with the carrier, it's about every week we get a supply ship, and it pulls up alongside, and they shoot cables across, and they hook these cables up, and they hook fuel lines up too to refuel the fuel on the ship for the aircraft. And then there's two different things going on. So they're moving mail and food and stuff over by these lines that they've pulled across, and you actually have people on the deck pulling these crates across, and they're moving everything around in the hangar decks. And then on the top, you have helicopters that are picking up crates on the supply ship and moving them over and setting them on the flight deck. So you got two different spots where they're doing it, and we did that every single week. And that's how we got our mail and how we got our food and supplies and everything.
It's incredible. What was it like to receive unexpected mail from your wife and soon find out the gender of your baby?
I kind of wish it would have been unexpected, but she always sent me an email and said what she was sending because she was excited to send it. So I actually knew it was coming.
Okay.
But you also don't know how, because it takes about 2 weeks to get to you. It's not like mailing it to somebody in Fort Worth and it being there tomorrow. But it takes a couple weeks because it's got to go to the port and then go to the supply ship and then get sent out to us. And it took a little bit longer when we were in the war zone too, because it would take them a little longer to get to us.
Where did you go, or what did you do during your off time or recreational time?
So mainly spent time with my friends and enjoying drinks. I'll say it that way. Well, where I was stationed in Lemoore, California, there's nothing to do there. So like when we were on deployment and we went and visited different places, it was actually really cool. They would, before we went to a port, they would offer, like, have you ever been on a cruise before? Mm-hmm. You know how they offer things to do, like that you can sign up for before you get there, like going scuba diving or like going on a safari. Excursions? Yeah, excursions. They would do the same thing for us. So there'd be excursions that we could sign up for, and I always tried to do those when we went to different places around the world. What
was your favorite little excursion that you did?
Oh, let's see. I went snowboarding in Dubai.
Really?
Yes. At the mall in Dubai, they have an actual ski hill inside the mall, and I went snowboarding, and I was like, that's something that'll be on my bucket list forever.
That's interesting. I've never heard of snowboarding inside of a mall before.
Yep. They have a whole ski slope inside of the mall, and there's a lift and everything. Yeah.
Do you recall any particularly humorous or unusual events aside from the snowboarding in the mall?
Oh. So, I have a friend, and we still talk about this every once in a while. Being on a ship in the middle of the ocean, especially the Pacific, you get some crazy sunsets, like nothing you've ever seen in your entire life. And we were finishing flight ops one night. The sun was going down, and it was a beautiful sunset. And then all of a sudden we look out and there's just thousands of dolphins in the water.
Wow.
We were out, I think it was mating season or something like that, and there were these pods that all met up in the middle of the ocean, and it was with the sunset in the background, and every single person on the flight deck stopped what they were doing and walked to that side, and it was like complete silence up there, and everybody was just staring at the dolphins. And it's something that's like etched into my mind and I'll never forget for the rest of my life. It's probably the coolest thing I've ever seen or ever will see. There's just, as far as the eye could see, there were dolphins, and they were all swimming because we were moving too.
In that moment, did you kind of just feel like maybe you weren't on a floating,
Most definitely.
thing of metal in the middle of nowhere?
It was definitely like a moment of clarity and just bliss. Like you're all of a sudden you're in a utopia instead of floating on a giant war machine in the middle of the ocean.
Absolutely. Do you recall the day that your service ended?
Yeah, it was quite stressful because we had a 7-month-old child and we were trying to get all of our stuff packed and get the trailer loaded because we were moving from California back to here, and at the time actually it wasn't like you'd think it would be, because my squadron was actually getting ready to go on deployment again, and in aviation we do what's called workups. So you got to go do all these qualifications, and you leave, like go to the boat for 2 weeks and get the pilots to stay qualified on landing on the carrier, go to different terrain to have them fly. You're working up. You actually are gone a lot when you're building up to go on deployment. They were starting that cycle again already, so everybody was gone whenever I got out. So it kind of made it a lot worse. Like I had to say bye to my friends before I actually got out, about a week and a half before I actually left. So it was kind of weird when I got out. It wasn't quite what I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
It was just, okay, bye. Like I went and I got my DD-214 and I drove off base and was gone. But I was still in for like 20 something days after that, because whenever you get out, whatever days you have left of leave, that's how far before you get out you actually leave.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So I was still in for almost a month whenever I got out.
Nice. And you talk about you moved from California. Did you go back to your hometown of like the North Richland Hills, Keller area? Or?
Yeah, so we actually went back to Keller, lived with my parents. We were going to stay with them for a little bit longer, but we ended up getting an apartment within like 2 weeks of being back. My wife said she didn't want to live with my parents.
Fort Worth construction for you.
Yeah.
How are you received by your family and community?
My mom was definitely happy to have me home. It was stressful, obviously, because I had just gone through 2 deployments and the wartime deployments. So she was just happy that I was getting out, because before I got married, I had talked about staying in and doing 20 years, which I'd be retiring here in a month and a half if I would have stayed in. So I do think about that sometimes, but all of my family was just happy for me to be home. Well, I think we had like a family get together whenever we got back.
Do you ever look back and think how different your life might have been if you would have stayed in?
I definitely think about it, because I have friends that are in and I see where they are and the positions they're in and what they do. But I've actually been quite successful in my civilian life. Not at first. It definitely was really hard. It took about 8 years before I got the job that I really wanted, and it was definitely difficult. But I don't know if I go back and change it. I definitely think about it, and like, hey, I'd be retiring here in a month and a half, so there's definitely that part. But
Absolutely.
I think I'm pretty happy with the decision I made.
That's good. Did you ever, so I know that you had mentioned you used some of your GI Bill to go back to school. Can you tell us a little bit about your time going back to school? Where did you attend? You know, why did you kind of stop your education?
I did online school with Embry-Riddle, focused on aviation. It was just a whole lot to handle. My kids were young at the time, and it was just bogging me down, and I couldn't completely focus on any one thing. So it was just too much to handle at the time, and I decided that I couldn't do it, and to just focus on my career. And I actually ended up just getting the experience to not have to have a college degree. Like, the job that I work right now requires a college degree, and I don't have one. But I was able to, basically, the experience that I have offset the need for a degree. And then I got to a point where I'm almost 40 now, and I'm set in my career that it doesn't make any sense for me to go back to school.
Absolutely. And Embry-Riddle is a really, really good aviation program.
Oh, definitely.
Was it kind of nice? I mean, with that, it kind of comes with a price tag. Was it nice to be able to use some of your benefits to help you through that? Do you think you would have gone elsewhere if you did not have those benefits?
I probably wouldn't have gone back to school at all if I didn't have the GI Bill. Thankfully, with the military, especially if you're in a role where you go to school like I did, and to learn a skill, I transferred into Embry-Riddle with like 30-something credits from what I got from the military. So they actually, whenever you work skilled jobs in the military, those translate into credits whenever you go to school, which is pretty cool.
Absolutely. Do you feel like your time spent on deployment changed you as a person?
Yes. I don't think that I realized how much of an impact it had on me when I was younger as I do now. Like, it was, back then it was just a job, and now I realize what the impact of that was, and I definitely think about it a lot more. Like what we were doing. I mean, we were bombing villages and places pretty much every day. So, and I just didn't think about it at the time, but it definitely has had an effect on me.
How did your service affect the way you kind of interacted with people post-service coming home?
So I definitely kind of put it out of sight, out of mind. I never went anywhere and asked for a veteran discount or told anybody I was a veteran, or really talked about it unless somebody pried it out of me. I just kind of put that experience behind me like it was a job that I didn't work anymore. And I didn't really understand the gravity of it and what I actually did until probably a couple of years ago. I mean, I've been out for 15 years now, and for the first 12, 13 years, I just kind of acted like I had never done it. Not that I wasn't proud of it. I will always be proud of that, and I'm thankful for going to be able to do that. But I definitely had a lot of guys like me that didn't go and actually participate in combat. We didn't feel like we did anything. I definitely had that way of thinking about it for a long time. Not until I started talking to guys who actually went into combat did I realize that, hey, everybody had a role and everybody was important, because they needed our jets to fly missions and protect them whenever they were out doing their thing on the ground.
Absolutely. Have you attended any reunions?
I have not. I've seen some on Facebook. Been invited to a few, but I've not been to any.
Do you plan on attending any in the future?
I might. It depends if it works out. Being a family man and having kids makes it hard to justify going and doing stuff like that. But if there's anything close, it's always stuff that's pretty far away. So that's why I never end up going.
What are some lessons that you learned from your military service that you feel like are still persistent in your life today?
I would say just the biggest thing is work ethic and being able to take constructive criticism and not get emotional about everyday things. That's probably the biggest thing, is I don't let my emotions run what I do. And I wish a lot more people learned how to do that. That's probably my biggest takeaway from the military. I mean, whenever you go to boot camp, yeah, there's a physical part of it, but the biggest thing is mentally preparing you to take orders and do what you're supposed to do without really second thought.
Absolutely. And we've kind of danced around your career and your civilian life. How do you feel like that career has allowed you kind of the best of both worlds? You know, what you enjoyed doing in the military versus being the family man that you pride yourself on?
Well, I mean, I still work for the military. So I still work for the government just as a civilian contractor. I work with the military every single day. So I'm able to affect that and be part of that, and also be able to stay here and not have to deal with actually being in the military. So I still got my foot in the door.
Kind of the best of both worlds.
Yes.
That's good. How has your military service impacted your feelings about war and the military in general?
I think it's a tough subject. If you've never been a part of it, then it's hard for people to understand. And as much as I'd love to sit here and say we don't need to be a part of conflicts, we don't need to put our foot in the door across the world, somebody has to. And it just so happens that we have the largest capabilities on the planet. So the world kind of looks at us to do that. They bash us at the same time, but then at the same time, when they get in a hairy situation, they expect us to be there to help them. And we're more capable than anybody else is. And as much as I don't want to send anybody to war, sometimes it's just absolutely necessary, even if it seems like it's not. But it's a hard situation, and you don't want to ever have to go do that, but it's necessary because of the passions and the religions and the way everybody believes all over the world. It's just, that's what everybody always talks about, world peace, and how that's what they wish for. In a perfect world, we wouldn't have to have militaries and go and do things like that, but somebody's got to be mentally strong to go do that and take care of the weak.
Absolutely. Is there anything that you want future generations to know about your military service? It instilled pride in me for the rest of my life, and know that I was always a part of something that was trying to be good. That's probably the biggest thing. That's very noble and a very worthy lesson for the generations to learn. Is there anything that you would like to add to your interview that we have not covered today?
No, I think we pretty much covered everything.
Alrighty. What would you like people to remember about your story?
That I was just happy with what I did. That did it serve me purpose for the rest of my life, which it did. It's why who I am. It's why I am who I am today. I mean, I joined the military when I was 18 years old, and I'd only been out of high school for 2 months. I mean, I don't know any adulthood where I wasn't in the military. So it's molded me into the person that I am today.
Alrighty, well thank you so much for coming in and sharing your recollections of your military experience with us today.
Thank you.